I'm Dale Fye. I am the chapter president of the Access Users Group Eastern Time and owner of Dev Solutions LLC. I used to be an MVP from 2013 through 16. Today we're going to be joined by Colin Riddington, who's going to present on controlling the application interface. Colin, if you would like to go ahead and share your screen.
I'd love to. Thank you very much for the introduction, Dale. My name is Colin Riddington, as it says there, and as Dale's already said, today's topic is controlling the application interface. And in fact, I'm hoping to have time to look at two different programs as part of this, one with that exact name and another one called My Attention Seeking Database. Oh, and before we go any further, if I can just ask you to turn on your microphones again if you've just muted them, just for a minute here. The last one of these sessions I did, as Crystal will know, there was a very, very long internet lag, and it was quite difficult, in fact, for people and me to communicate properly during the presentation. So I'm about to play a party game with you, because it's coming up to Christmas. And in a minute, I'm going to say ready, steady, go, or rather, I'm going to say ready, steady. And as soon as I finish saying steady, could you do me a favour and say go, and I'll see how quickly it comes back. Are we all ready and microphones on? I don't know if you're playing or not here because I can't see the participants. Okay, I'll do it anyway. Ready, steady,
go.
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 And I bet John Clark in about 5 minutes will say go if he hasn't already, just to wind me up. But Dale, can you turn it? Can you do it again?
I will. I'm going to share my screen again, and
we might get started in a week or so.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was next to no internet lag, which was pretty impressive there. Thank you everyone for turning up, and you should be back seeing the PowerPoint presentation again. Okay, just check that people can see that first slide again.
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Right, a little bit about me anyway, and I think I may have said some of this in a previous presentation, but therefore I'll whiz through this quite quickly. Some background about me. Like most of the people probably here, I've been developing in Access for over 20 years. I started seriously with Access 97, that I have got copies going back to Access 1.0 as well. For most of this time, I was teaching in secondary schools in the UK and had responsibility for data analysis both in my local school and eventually across the area. And as part of that, I tried struggling with Excel, as many people do, and realised that that was totally unsatisfactory, moved on to doing Access apps for my own use, and then later developed them for all staff in my own school and then a number of UK schools. When I retired from teaching a few years ago, I set up Mendip Data Systems. That's my email address if anyone's interested. And I did this originally to distribute the commercial apps that I've been doing for schools, but I soon broadened that focus into a wider variety of apps for businesses and developers. I've now got two websites, one not being enough. If you do note them, you'll find that they're almost identical at the moment, but eventually they're going to become Mendip Data Systems for the commercial apps, isladogs for the free stuff. And in terms of that, there is a lot of Access articles, example apps, sample code, security challenges, etc., etc. And I've just added a news page as well for forthcoming events. The site contains commercial apps, as I said, for the groups of people that I mentioned already. And I'm a regular contributor at many forums with the username isladogs, which is why I've got that as one of my websites there. And in terms of why I use Access, I basically like to challenge what I can do with it, and I basically try and stretch as much as I can do. And amongst those things, I did a recent presentation on automatic form resizing, and this particular topic fits into the same category of controlling the application interface. And there's various ways we can do that. First of all then, simple things that many, if not all of you, will know how to do, showing and hiding the navigation pane either through code or through the interface itself. Doing the same with the ribbon and the QAT. They used to be absolutely tied together. You either had both of them or you had neither of them. In the last few weeks, Microsoft have changed that so you can now toggle the QAT on and off independently of the ribbon. It's made things a little bit more complicated, and I haven't taken that into account in my latest work that I'm doing today. You can show and hide the taskbar. That's less commonly done, I think, and probably less commonly known how it is done. Various things you can do with the background. You can dim it, you can blur it, you can remove it completely. And most importantly, and this is where I'm focusing today, then you can show or hide the entire application window. And when you do that, you can also maximize the form. You can fill the entire screen. You can get rid of the title bar. You can get rid of the taskbar, as I'll show you later. Borderless forms, I'll show you how you drag them in a second. You do fancy things. Windows 11 builds this in, but I haven't got that. You can add rounded corners to forms if it actually is something you like the look of. And you can do fancy things like animate forms, add transparency, and fade them in and out. Do all sorts of things if you want to do it. And lots of things about forms there. I haven't mentioned reports until now. Reports add a special challenge in terms of doing these with the application interface hidden. So I've got various methods of actually working with reports as well. And when it comes on to the second part of this, trying to get users' attention, there's various ways you can do that. Text that scrolls across a screen, commonly called marquee text, flashing text. You can use balloon tooltips, commonly called system tray notifications, although there's a complication to that as well these days. Now, amongst these various things here, some of those can be used to help make a database more secure. Not all by any means, but some can do so. Anyway, just about time we actually looked at what I'm going to show you in terms of access. In a second then, you're going to see my desktop with this access database open floating on the desktop there with no interface. You'll see it's got rounded corners here, and that will work, I hope, just as it's shown there. Now, I could click on either of these two and it will open the database automatically, but if I do that, there's a rather strange quirk that it will show the interface again, which I don't want to do. So in this particular case, I'm just going to move this out of the way, and you should now be able to see the application that I mentioned before. So, in case you think I've painted the background on, okay, as you can see, I'm moving this around here, and it's a borderless form. I'm using these as I tend to do like them anyway, but I use these often when I'm hiding the interface because I think they look better than having a title bar on the top. I think that tends to spoil the appearance of that to some extent. The standard problem with borderless forms is, of course, without a title bar, people don't know how to drag them. I can drag it either by clicking on an empty space here, or I can do so by clicking on an empty space on there, or I can use this button. Any of those will work. And it's very simple to do. It's one line of code, which if I just bring this up on here now, command drag form there, when I click the mouse down button or any of the other things I did there, I just raise this one particular code here, DragFormWindow Me. Now, it sounds simple. It is fairly simple. It uses two APIs. If I just maximize this for a second, I'm not going to explain the APIs. I'm using them heavily throughout this application here. I'm not going to explain them because it'll take the whole hour, but basically to say there's two APIs that I'm using. Both, like everything else in this, have been converted to work with 64-bit, and all I'm doing with this function is making it as simple as possible. I operate each of those APIs in turn. I tell it to actually apply it to the current form, me, in that particular code that I showed you before, and it basically works while the mouse button is held down. Carrying on with this then. Right, maximizing the form, nothing special about that. In this particular case, I've done it so it's covering the taskbar as well. And if I just go to here a second and cover up the taskbar and just restore the form size and do this again, this time I've got the taskbar in front. If I fill the entire screen, no matter what setting I've done with the taskbar, it will actually remove it out of the way there. Let's turn the taskbar back on. Let's restore the form size. And all I'm doing here is showing you that while the application interface is hidden, there's lots of things I can do. And they don't cause any problems at all. Right, hide the form. There's times when you want to do that. Okay, and in doing that, obviously, I rely on the taskbar icon to restore it. Now, the code I used to use for this, there was a problem. And the problem was that when I actually clicked on that, it would bring the interface back. That's been solved. So therefore I can click on this to minimize the form to the taskbar. I can bring it back again. Somebody a few years ago at one of the forums said that they actually wanted to use this, but they wanted to hide the taskbar icon. I thought that was a bad idea, but it can be done as well. So if you look here, we've got the taskbar button there next to the recording session program here. If I hide that, hooray! As you see, that's now disappeared. One thing you really wouldn't want to do at this stage is to minimize the form, because otherwise you would have no means of getting it back. Let's bring that icon back again anyway. As you can see, it's now reappeared. Okay, so having played around with this form here, let's bring certain things back in. If I want to, I can show the application window. And all I've done there is show the window itself. No navigation pane, let's toggle that on. No ribbon, let's toggle that on. I can hide any of those individually, but of course if I hide the application window, I will actually lose the rest of them. If I try and show the ribbon, I have to have the application window open as well, etc., etc. While you're developing, it's important that you get to VBE fairly easily, and so, not surprisingly, I've got a means of actually doing that as well. Okay, let's open VBE, and it's opened on my other screen. And so I can actually get to the code fairly easily while I'm doing this. One thing I should say is that I've disabled the right-click context menu. I found that using this sort of setup, I sometimes have problems. If I try to do that, I could crash access. So if I want to get to the design window, I've got a button here. I won't do that now. Now, having actually got that, let's close the VBE again. Okay, now obviously I've done this just with one form. If it was limited to that, it would be pretty useless, so let's just open another form at random. Got rid of the first one here. I could have hidden it, but I've closed it, and I've got another form opened. Okay, again floating on the background whilst it's there, and it's just a list of access error codes, quite a lot of them, some 3,000 or so. I'm sure you know them all by heart. If I click on the view report there, when I've done that, I've done it in print preview, and in order to do it in print preview, I have to show the interface again. I'll come back to that point later, but as you can see here, I've got the print preview ribbon. If I close that, I've gone back to where I was before. Let's just close this form, go back to here. So I can open any other form, no problem at all, and if I want to, I can keep the interface hidden. That also works for fancy forms like split forms. And I don't know how many of you have noticed this, but fairly recently I think they've changed the appearance of the scroll bar. They've now got fancy rounded ends. They probably did it months ago and I haven't noticed till now. I certainly haven't seen it announced before now. Not relevant to this, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Colin, Dale here.
Yeah.
For a while I was hiding the application interface, the application window, when I was trying to create applications that I thought would look more professional, look more like VB or whatever. But I found that first off, the forms that you then had to be pop-up forms.
They do. Thank you for. Yeah.
I thought I had encountered a situation where if I clicked on a button to open a new form and hid the form that was already active, and then had another button that would open a third form and hid the second form, because of the nature of the AC Dialog feature, it was basically popping the first form back open again as well. Is that I haven't used, so I stopped doing that because it just took too much coding in order to hide the application window for a complex application. Have you encountered that as well?
I have, and to be honest, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. I avoid the problem because I like to keep as little open as possible. Doesn't matter whether it's got this setup or just a standard one with the application window showing, I almost always will close an object that I don't need and then reopen it afterwards. Some people will just make them hidden. I've found that that can cause problems. So yes, I have experienced it, and the solution for me is just to do one thing at a time. Especially if you've got pop-ups, it really can get quite complicated, as you said, and especially if you go for 3 or more of them in a row, then I can get into a real tangle. I avoid the problem here. So as you can see, when I opened that form there, I just closed the main form, open that one. When I close the other form, if I can find that, I just reopen the first one there. And I've hard coded it, but there's ways of getting around that as well.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks.
But thank you. As you said, one of the reasons for doing this, and it's often one of the reasons why people ask me about it, is to make things look more professional than having the access window in the background. And again, that's one of the reasons why I do this with borderless forms as well. I've mentioned split forms. With split forms, you've got an extra issue in the design there. Split forms look like they are 2 different forms, but of course the standard split form is just one form, okay, which clever trickery in the background that actually makes it look like 2 parts, and that needs some special treatment with the code. I'll come to that in a minute. Navigation forms, although they're very clever, I don't use them because I find them very limiting. Users like doing these because they can get a lot of things onto a form very easily with drag and drop, until they try to do something clever and then they realize that they're stuck and they have to start again with the standard form. But again, navigation forms work absolutely perfectly with this setup, no problem whatsoever. And I don't know if I saw this here, I've got a fade effect on this form here, just for interest there. It's fixed at 5 seconds. When I close that, it fades out and the other one comes back in again, if that round that rocks your boat there. Oh, and while I'm doing strange things here, I mentioned rounding earlier on. Let's just turn that off for a second. Standard form, let's just increase it to a rather large amount there. Let's go to a very large amount, and let's take it to a ridiculous extreme here where I've got a near circle in the form. I'm sure there's a use for that. I can't think what it would be, but for us, maybe a small rounding, 50 or something like that, you might like the effect of it. I suppose it makes it look a bit more like an Apple program. Okay, so I've done as far as navigation forms here. Queries. Typically, there's no reason to ever have anyone open a query directly from your application, nor a table. You don't want users looking at those. But if I do that, I have to show the application interface. And of course, people can mess around with the data, which I don't want. But of course, queries and tables have no code attached to them. So if I close that, there's no way I can get the form back, which I've just closed. Let's reopen it. So if we're going to do that, let's do a better method. Let's put it in a form, and I've over enlarged that form. That's something I thought I'd fixed, but I forgot to do so here, and that's now got me into a problem. I'm going to have to close the app here. If I actually put the query into a form, of course, then it's just like any other form. I can work that independently. Let's just mention reports briefly. I've already shown you a report in print preview. The ribbon is showing. You may or may not be happy with that, but when I close the report, I lose the ribbon, I lose the application interface. Another way is to use report view. And here it's just sitting floating on the desktop. I've got a print button if I want it. Code there to bring back what I had before. And a third method, it looks almost identical to the other one, but it actually is to make the report part of a form as a subform of that. As I say, it looks almost identical to before there. I'll show you that in design view later. And lastly, you may not be very impressed with this, but if you wanted to, you can have a message box sitting on its own on the screen as well. And that probably took me longer to get that working than any other single part of this. You may think the effect isn't particularly worth it, but alright, it can be done with a standard message box. It can't if you use what's called a formatted message box, however. Okay, so in terms of this, let's look at some of the code behind this. I won't do it all by any means here. When I'm loading a form, let's for example do the form query here. Oh, I've done it again. That was a mistake.
Can you press Control F4 to close it when that happens?
I could have done, yeah. show the navigation pane. Right click, design view, that would have been better here. In design view then I'll go to the form load event. And the only reason I was choosing this form is because I've got no other code in there. Alright, so in the form load event I've got this particular function here, HideAppWindow Me, again referring to the current form. One line. That, along with several other similar things, is part of the mod database window here. So the HideAppWindow Me, it's using 3 APIs. The first one, which is particularly complicated to explain, I'm not going to try and do so here. You can use many variations on this. Just select your form, choose the style, choose whether or not you want to have the taskbar icon shown or not. Standard one is I show this, show the window, alright, and make sure you know which window you're going to show effectively, but I've not explained that in detail. I can have a similar one here, okay, also hiding the icon on the taskbar, and all the difference is I remove that part there, I just comment that out. On a split form, instead of using the current form and showing that and hiding the window, I have to refer to the parent form. That's the way split forms are actually done in the background there. The code is almost identical. So when I actually open the split form there, form load, hide parent at window me. Otherwise exactly the same as before. In terms of this then, I think I've shown you most of the things I want to show you there. I've got code that will allow me to create the rounded corners. Again, lots of APIs. That is quite complicated. I won't explain it now. Code to fade the form in and out. Many more APIs here. Code to drag the form. Oh yes, I showed you that before. Again, 2 APIs. Mouse down. Pull the form wherever you want to go. You can even do this to actually move a different form from the one that you're actually holding the mouse button down on, which is quite neat. I have code in here again with lots of APIs to hide, to show the taskbar. Code that doesn't require APIs is fairly well known. Show, hide the navigation pane, or even minimize the navigation pane. No reason why I have to have functions here. I just find it easier to remember a simple name like that than actually remembering to do both of those lines there. Code to resize the form. I won't go through automatic form resizing. Code to hide and show the ribbon, which I may have to modify in the future for QATs separately here. To show the ribbon, you just show the ribbon toolbar. To hide it, you just make sure it doesn't show. You can minimize it if it's actually visible, and you can then toggle it to actually maximize it again, and you can do that by checking whether it's minimized or not. And there's code here to calculate the number of twips per pixel and so on, which I don't need to go into. And there's code here that I've been using to some extent here, right, successfully there, where I click on this, it should go to the current bit of code that's being used. The problem with that is if I have more than one window open, it goes to whichever one was last open here. So if I now click on that, I should have gone here to the taskbar part on this. I'm going to stop on that. Before I leave this particular application, is there any questions, anything that anyone wants me to explain in a little bit more detail?
Colin, could you show how you're doing the query as a form?
Yep. Hopefully. Expect me to crack. Oh, right. It is working now as I want it to. Right, so that then here, let's see if I've got this in design view here. I'm glad you asked me that question, Dale.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Obviously, it's something I actually don't normally do. Right, so how do I show you the form there? The query as a form there. Right, show the navigation pane, form query, design view. Let's put this in design view and then I can move it out of the way. Right, so all I've got, nothing special there, it's just a standard form with the query as its record source. The only thing that I've done on this is just as before, and I think I showed you this already. I'm hiding the application window. Nothing special about it at all. Does that answer the question you wanted?
Yeah, it does. So I for some reason I was thinking it looked like a data sheet, and I wasn't sure how you were doing that, but theoretically What I do is I basically have a wrapper form, and then I have a datasheet subform, which I just set the source object of the datasheet to the query when I want to be able to display the results of a query in a form similar to what you've done there.
I tend not to use datasheets. There's no reason why they would be any more difficult to actually use in this particular setup.
The reason they're a little more difficult is because you can't see a header and a footer
yes.
on a data
So
sheet. That's why you need the wrapper form for your header and footer piece of things. But
I agree totally. Sorry, I missed the point there. Yes, and in the automatic form resizing app that I demonstrated recently, I've since that got datasheets working with automatic form resizing, which for 15 years I thought was impossible. It can be done. You can even zoom datasheets. But yes, whenever I do a datasheet, I make it a subform, just so I can have buttons. It's as simple as that. Okay. Right. If there's no other questions, back to the PowerPoint. If you want to download that, the latest version of this app is on the website. That is the URL for that. I'm sorry it's so lengthy. It's a product of the old website that I had where the page names were set for me, and I'll eventually shorten all of this. Okay, so isladogs.co.uk. It's also on the Mendip Data Systems site. Control-application-interface. Long number there, HTML, or you can just go to the main menu screen and find it from the menu under example applications there. But if you get to that, the first part of the page will look like this. And as you can see, I updated this about a month ago. Let's move on to the second database. And the second one is actually designed, it can work with the interface hidden or visible. In this particular case, I'm going to have it with the interface showing. If I click on this, then the interface is actually visible in this one. As I say, it's not relevant to this to have it hidden here. So in this, I've deliberately got a similar layout for the main menu form where I can show the code if I want to. And the idea of this is to show various ways of getting your users' attention in Access. Many of these things are fairly simple, and many of these you will be familiar with. I'm not going to focus too much on the simple things here, and some of them are deliberately over the top, and I'm actually showing you to say you can do this, but do you really want to? So, you need your user's attention. Well, apart from having a beep, which you may or may not have heard then, that's really not got much impact. They'll ignore it. They'll probably even just close it without even reading it here. You can make it a bit more obvious. Formatted message boxes here, where the first section can be bolded. Some people don't like that. They think it looks old-fashioned, back to the 90s or so. You may or may not agree. I use it quite a lot. But if you want to get anything more fancy than that, you are really limited, the size of the text and so on. Kevin Bell of AccessUI.com has created a whole series of different examples under the heading Task Dialog Samples here. And his website contains a huge number of items. I'm not going to show you all of these, just to say that if I go to here, you can see on the website there many different examples. The code behind them is really very complicated. I've only partly understood what he's doing there, but using it again is fairly easy. Let's just show you at random some of the things you can do. With Access message boxes, standard ones, you're limited to 3 buttons, plus if you want to use it, the help button, which practically nobody uses, I think. With this, you can have as many as you want. You can have all of them if you want, although it's hard to know what you do with all of those. And by the way, none of these do anything other than just close the form the way I've set it up here, but you can obviously have different tasks for each one. You can also have a banner. You can have a different button to the normal ones here. You can have what Kevin calls command buttons, which are a slightly more modern interface here. Press me. No, choose me instead. More impressive, you can have a banner again, different badge. You can actually have a hyperlink where you can get more information, and that would take you to, in the footer section there, would take you to the same website I've shown you before. And another thing you can't do in standard message box is you can't do a progress bar or a timer. You can do both of those with this, and I'll let you know to just close in another couple of seconds there. So I won't show you any of the code to this, but to say that as long as it's within the examples Kevin's done, it's fine. I wanted to do something extra, and I couldn't work out how to do that with one of these task dialog forms, so I went back to a customized message form, and I'll show you that one in a couple of minutes. Customized message forms I use a lot. I use them partly so I can get a message that's bigger, larger text. I can have rich text, red, italic, bold text, and so on. I can have as many buttons as I want, and I have a different section at a different size there as well. If I click on the next one here, you can really overdo it. And that is the sort of thing that kids love when they're doing PowerPoint, and it looks hideous. Right, so don't do that. This is about to play a sound. And that was a buzzer sound there. You can alert your users. You can do as much as you like with that, and I'm going to show you the same form in different ways later here. Hopefully you will hear the next thing. If you haven't got your speakers turned up, then you won't have heard anything I've been saying, but okay, the next bit you'll need this. I use the next form as a deliberately in-your-face, gaudy form that will be noticed by users, hopefully. And I do this when I'm about to close the application for maintenance. We're trying to get people out before it actually closes without getting complaints here. So when this actually opens here, it's going to show a very, very gaudy form on purpose, but it's also going to include a text-to-speech message, which I believe you will be able to hear. And for 15 seconds or so, you get a rest from my voice. So when I click the OK button, it's going to start a simulated close-down procedure.
Hi, Colin Riddington. Apologies, but this application needs to be closed for system maintenance in just under 3 minutes at 14:44. Please save your work and close the application.
Now, after the text-to-speech message finishes, the application now closes down in about 3 minutes' time. And as you can see, it's counting down the time until that happens. Now, the user can click the OK button in order to hide the form and carry on with their work and try and make sure they finish everything in that time. But as you can see here, it reappears, and it reappears about every 30 seconds or so. Now, that basically means that the user is unable to forget about it. They wouldn't be able to normally stop the countdown, but I've got that just for this purpose here on the demonstration in order to actually move on. But that wouldn't exist in a real application. Now, the code for the text-to-speech message is shown as follows. That's the form that you were just looking at, and here is the code. It's very simple. You set the time according to what the current system time is. You set up a text-to-speech message, and the text-to-speech message finds the user's full name, determines the time, and then actually just reads out that message in a fairly natural voice. In order to make this code work, you need to have the Microsoft Speech Object Library reference. There's two of those, both with the same name to make life complicated. The one you want is in the Windows System 32 Speech Common folder, and it's called sappy.dul. You can actually have a number of different things. You can animate your forms, move them around. You can add transparency to your forms, and I've already shown you this. You can fade them in and out. Show you a couple of effects. See what you think. Probably you won't like them all. So I'm fading that form out, and I'm moving a picture of Isla, my dog, up onto the screen. Now, that just looks like an image. It obviously is an image of her, but it's actually a form with transparency, as I'll show you in a second here. And I've got my same customized message form here. Okay, I'm using that to actually advertise my website here. And on my website, if you want to get to these, if you didn't actually note the full URL down, just click on example apps. Okay, this is the attention seek app, the other one was there, and so on here. Okay, I'll just close that. And you can also get to my YouTube channel as well by clicking on this. And it's fairly recent as well. There's only a few items on there. And it looks like the internet is slowing down here. And we've got some of the videos I've got on there. Whoa! I don't want to have me playing twice. Now, just close that a second here. As well as that, then, if I go to design view, okay, you can see it is a form with transparency. Okay, so an image all of the stuff in the background there isn't shown. I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back to where I was before. I'm afraid I'm just going to have to reanimate the dog, but this time I will just show you how to close the form. And that of course is the problem with forms that are fancy like this. Where's your close button? Who knows? It's on a nose. And this opens a second one. Now this is pretty horrible. On purpose. Okay, and that one there, you saw probably it moved in from the side, it grew, and as it grew it changed colours as well. And it hasn't quite done it the way I wanted it to there by me doing design view on the previous one. I messed it up slightly. At the end of that it rounded the corners. Fade it out, get rid of it. If you really want to do that, make sure there's a good reason. Okay, let's go back to more conventional things that you might want to use. Get the user's attention. Okay, before you're about to actually flash up that message I showed you before, have it flashing on and off. And that will flash on and off. Users are unable to stop it, in this case for 10 seconds that I've set there. And after 10 seconds it will disappear, and in reality I'd normally have that other form showing there. Other things. You want to get attention again. So, draw your attention by dimming anything you don't want them to be looking at the time there. Or do it a different way. Should have gone to Specsavers. You need your eyesight testing. Alright, so that really isn't very clear at all, is it? For you to read, it's not meant to be. Luckily it comes back. If that's not enough for you, you can actually remove the background completely. Now up until about Windows 7 or so, you can actually go back to the desktop. These days you actually can't do that. I can now instead just have a blue screen or whichever colour I want. This is a screen that is actually done in Access there. So I've got different ways of focusing them on what I want them to look at. Next thing I can show you here is how to set up a balloon tooltip alert. Now this is only shown if you turn quiet hours off, and I've had them turned on so in order to prevent me getting interrupted with email messages and so on. I'll probably now get the things appearing there. So if I now click this here, we get a message appearing over here. And when Balloon Tooltips or System Tray notifications first came out, they were interactive. You could do things with them. You could put URLs there and code that in VBA, and it will allow you to go on to somewhere else. You can't do that anymore, unfortunately, so it's less useful than it used to be. But if I now, before I forget, turn this back to having quiet hours so I'm not interrupted by people here, nothing happens when I click on that. So it's of limited value perhaps. Okay, I've shown you flashing text. Let's have scrolling text. Something's been around for a long time here, and I could have set this up so it scrolls across the entire screen, but I'm showing the same message repeatedly, right, to alert the users to that. Let's stop that. That's fairly obvious. This is less obvious, and if I didn't point it out you might not even notice it. Up at the top here I'm scrolling the title bar, the same text in the title bar. Let's flash it instead. Off, on, off, on. But will they notice it? Probably not. And there's one more. I'm going to leave this for now. This one shows you lots of effects put together, including zooming the screen and turning the screen upside down, and it's designed to be quite irritating basically. So I won't show you that, especially being you won't hear the sound. Finally, I'm trying to give you ideas for use. I'm not trying to suggest that you ever put all of these into one database like I have here. Use it sparingly or you will annoy your users. And if you actually want to know how I've done these, again for time I'm probably not going to go through it now. Okay, the code can be actually seen by clicking on any of these buttons. I'll show you one of those in a second there as an example. I've got one more thing to mention here. So if I click on, as an example here, remove the background here, remember to close all the windows, do it again, remove the background then. Okay, what I've done for this particular one here is I've hid the navigation pane, hidden the taskbar, and I've opened a form that's a dark blue colour. You remember it's a blue background with a message on top. If it's actually prior to VBA 7, I could have actually put it straight onto the desktop and I could have hidden those icons, but that doesn't work for me in current versions of Windows, whether 32-bit or 64-bit. And then after that, I'm doing things like hiding the application window and so on, showing a message, etc. So you can see all of these, how they're done if you want to, and I'll explain any individual ones if you want, including the animation. Maybe I should just mention the animation very quickly here. With the animation one then, remember the dog coming up on the screen there, I faded the main menu out, I opened the form, the transparent form, and when I open the transparent form, all I'm doing with that is telling it where to start off, okay, the initial position, and then on a timer event I'm moving that across, up, until it gets to a certain endpoint, and then I'm stopping it when I reach where I want to. With the other animated form there, the one that zoomed in from the top left corner, I'm also changing the colours and so on, and I'm doing all of that on timer events. And it's not really worth me going through the details there, but you can study that and see how it works if you want to. Does anyone want me to actually talk about any of those, though, properly in any more detail before I move on?
This is Dale again. I did notice that on almost all those forms, you're calling the hide application window. Once you've hidden it, it's really not necessary to call it over and over again. I'm assuming the reason you're doing that is because some of the buttons actually reveal it again, and you just want to make sure that it's hidden on each of those forms. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely correct. And again, with all of these things, I'm also putting something in called ResetDisplay. So basically, because I can do these things in different orders, I found that, and again, you wouldn't have all these things in your own individual applications. You only have a few of them. But for demonstration purposes, I want to make sure that it behaves, hopefully, as I want it to each time. So whichever button I press, I start off by resetting the display. And the reset display, I minimize the navigation pane, turn off any flashing text here, turn off any marquee text, turn off the timer, set buttons. I don't know if you noticed some of the captions changed as I did things here, set them back to where they were before and so on. So all I'm really doing is making sure that it behaves predictably for me. If I was only doing this in a simple way with 2 or 3 of these effects, or even one of these effects, I wouldn't need to be going to those extent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? No? Okay, I think I've probably bored you into submission there. So, the URL, I've already shown you how to get to that from the main menu of the website, the main page of the website there. This is the page for that. And I'll just mention one thing I'm working on. I've spent 1 second doing this. Okay, and that is I've got an application on YouTube. I'm in the process of taking it into an Access add-in, which allows you to translate any text, a bit like they do on the Google website, and then to speak that in a number of different voices, depending on which ones you have installed there. And the idea is that that will be released as a free application in the near future, and I'm going to have another commercial application where you can use similar code there, not to speak the text there, but to translate all of your forms and reports into any other language you choose. And if you want to be able to do that on the fly as well. Okay, let's just come out of this.
That's really cool.
Thank you. Was that Ben, I think?
Yeah.
Oh,
I made my own message box, and then I had a client in Japan want to use the app, and so on the message box I added a button they could click that would translate the message box text into Japanese.
That is one of the stages I've still got to deal with. Yes, you can do it for individual code, but it's actually doing this without having to manually code each individual one is something I'm still working on. It's one of the reasons why I've put that to one side for now while I'm working on my websites, but I will get there as well. That is certainly, that and input boxes as well if you use them.
Right. The challenge is that the API that Google releases changes from time to time and kills your code.
Regularly, yep. So if possible, stick to the older APIs, I find, there if they don't withdraw them. And even if they've got newer, better features, often that would just make extra work for you. So I'm trying to avoid it if possible.
Colin, I just wanted to say I wasn't bored. I was awestruck.
Right. Oh, is that Gregg? Thank you very much, Gregg. I apologise that I know I've glossed over the code, and I know that if I actually did that, we would turn into a 3-hour session. I'd also expose my lack of detailed understanding of some of the APIs. I tend to use APIs as black boxes that I get them to work, to do what I want them to do, and then I say, fine, that's it, leave them as they are. I don't always understand all of them. I understand some, but not all of them. But I'm glad that you found it useful, or interesting anyway, Gregg. And as I say, if you look at the apps, you can study the code at your leisure and then extract the bits that you want and ignore the bits that are deliberately designed to say, please don't do this just because you can.
Colin, this is George. I just want to say you're a man after my own heart. Make it work, and then that's enough.
Thank you, George. All right. I was expecting Crystal to join in halfway through to ask me to explain an API that I would have actually shown my embarrassment because I couldn't, but I managed to gloss over that, thankfully. So I'm now inspiring it to go back and try and think of one.
Colin, this is John Clark. How you doing this morning?
I'm fine, except it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, John. What time
right
is
you
it
are.
for you? Have you had your breakfast yet?
I have, and 2 cups of coffee. Yeah, it's about 10 o'clock here in the morning. Look, I just wanted to say, I think you introduced the attention-seeking database about 4 years ago on AWF, something like that.
Yep.
But since then, I have plagiarized it to the highest level of pagellarity.
I love that word.
Used it freely. I've taken full credit for it. It's made me look like a rock star, and I can't thank you enough. So I just wanted to put that out there.
You're welcome. I mean, I tend to grab whatever code I see, I acknowledge it as well. A lot of that code isn't mine, or it wasn't originally mine. I may have adapted it, but if I see an idea and I think I can use it, I bung it in as well. So each of that, and same with the control in the application interface, that one I first introduced several years ago on a forum. I've been adapting them all the time, and probably will continue to do so. So if anyone's got any ideas of something to add, please let me know.
This is Kim. One of the things I can't talk enough about is that VBA watchdog for catching errors. I no longer have to do any error handling anywhere in my Access applications, and you get a beautiful form that comes up to the users. I'm not trying to not pitch what you're doing here, but I just wanted to share that with everybody because it saves me so much time to not be putting on air, go to, all of that. It's really nice.
I've just noted it again. A lot of people have mentioned it recently, and I agree. I do need to actually explore it again, but thank you for that.
So I have a quick question. Maybe you covered this. This is Ken Ismert.
Hi, Ken.
We have a need for a custom message box that will come to the top, even with a pop-up form showing a report over. Is there any of the message box examples that you've shown that capable of doing that?
I think so. If it's all right, I will just briefly go back in and share my screen again and show you how I did that.
Can I add on to what Kim said about VB Watchdog? I put a link in the chat for the page. I also put a link in the chat to the video for Peter's presentation on VB Watchdog. He did that for Maria's group, lunchtime, about a year ago, I think. He also goes into some really cool stuff with code. It's a really, really informative presentation. And also, gosh, too bad Peter isn't here. I'm sure he would have jumped in on that and explaining the API also.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for doing that. I will look at that link and I will investigate it. Clearly, so many people use it. I'm missing out by not doing so by the sound of it. These customized message forms, that I showed you several times in different ways, including on the animation form here. If I just go over to the navigation pane then, form message form here, design view. Notice I'm using automatic form resizing, so in design view it's much smaller and it will then expand out to what I want there. As I do each of these, I'm actually then telling it what to load in terms of various open arcs effectively here, and for this the text that I showed you, that was the first form here. That's the rich text. That's a separate section there. This is the second one. Okay, the background is set in the code there. Okay, the same form where I was just making the point there, and so on, and the transparency. So basically, you can have one form that you just modify to your needs. You make it the size you want to make sure you can fit in everything you want, and it's very simple. Ken, does that actually answer the question that you were asking me about?
So, and this will pop to the top.
It's a pop-up form, yeah.
So, I mean, basically, we have a situation where we have pop-up form that's displaying a report over that. And then an error happens, and we want to make the error message come to the top reliably.
Right, then you certainly could do that with the custom message form. You can certainly do it with this. You can have this appearing at the top there. So if I just mention here, then let's find one of these here. So, and that first one there, the one I clicked on before, I open the message form, and I'm doing this filter to the first record in that table. I'm not actually using OpenArgs, but it's the same thing. And somewhere else, I'm going to have the same form. I could probably find it more quickly with other args instead, and so on.
This is Kim again. I posted a link further up in the chat window for another application that they provided for free that does a message box that looks very similar, and you have total control. If you're not finding what you look at that. It's much nicer than what you get in the current Access message box, and you have a lot more control over how the text looks. It's basically set up as HTML text, what you want to print in there, and it looks really nice. So if this isn't going to help you, you can check that out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
You sure did show us a bunch of impressive stuff, Colin. Thanks also for sharing your database so we can put it into our own projects.
Thank you, Crystal. Kim put up a link to the enhanced message box, which I think was Bompui, I've forgotten his real name, who no longer develops an Access. Very clever, it has coloured text and so on. What I don't like about that is you are again limited to the buttons, the standard Access buttons, and limited to the standard Access font size. So it's one stage further than a formatted message box, but I think a customised message box you can do far more still. Ken, what on earth is the circus tent look?
That was one of your forms with alternating red and white horizontal stripes.
Oh, yeah, basically I'm about to close down, get out, and that's the one with the text-to-speech.
Yeah, I guess I have worse taste than anybody else, but I kind of liked it.
I hope all of your forms don't look like that, otherwise it had no impact at all, but other than turning your users away from the screen. But anyway, yeah, I've used that form for about 15 years. It does the job. It was deliberately gaudy, so I'm done, and hopefully it's been useful to some of you.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Colin for presenting for us today.
Many thanks, Colin. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin.
Thanks ever so much for that unprompted thank you.
Great presentation, Colin. Thanks a lot. I have a presentation on the 28th with Maria, our final.
Is that another one of your tooltips?
It's the fourth part in what turned out to be a 4-part series for the beginning Access developer. And
okay.
This one is on VBA.
All right, great. We'll see you guys next month, hopefully.
Cheers.
Nice job.
I've already said my thanks. You ain't getting it twice.
Oh, rats. Oh, I was looking forward to it again.
Thank you, Colin. Appreciate it.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Cheers.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Ben.
Merry Christmas.